Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 26th of March 2025. From the news section. BBC Scotland Head of News Gary Smith to stand down. This article was written by Jodie Harrison, and it's being read by me, Corey. The BBC's Head of News in Scotland has announced he is to stand down after almost a decade in charge. Gary Smith, BBC Scotland's Head of News and Current Affairs, will leave the role in the summer. Smith has spent his 40-year journalistic career with the BBC, apart from a 4-year stint at Channel 4 News in the late 80s and early 90s. He said he intends to stand down to concentrate on writing and helping the next generation of journalists in their careers. He said, "It has been a privilege to have a front row seat as history was made over the past 4 decades in Scotland, the UK and the world. I've worked with some brilliant colleagues, been involved in the biggest stories and had a lot of fun along the way. Now the time's right for a change, to revisit my first love of writing, to give something back to journalism by helping the next generation of reporters, and to have the space to spend more time with my wonderful family." Born and brought up in Glasgow, Smith was educated at Glasgow University before undertaking a postgraduate journalism diploma at Cardiff University. He started with the BBC as a news trainee in 1984, before becoming a sub-editor with BBC News the following year. Moving to Channel 4 News in 1989, he worked as a senior political producer, foreign producer and programme editor, covering stories such as the departure from Number 10 of Margaret Thatcher, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the civil war in Kashmir. Returning to the BBC in 1992, he worked as assistant editor on the 9 o'clock news, as well as editor of political news and UK news editor. He took over as head of news at BBC Scotland in 2016. BBC Scotland director Hayley Valentine said it was hard to overstate the departing head's contribution to news journalism and the BBC. She said, "Gary has steered the newsroom through some huge stories: the EU referendum, several elections, the trial of Alex Salmond, COVID, and the death of Her late Majesty the Queen at Balmoral. His relationship with Network News and the high regard in which he is held there have made our newsroom all the stronger. At BBC Scotland, he has transformed our digital news offer, overseen the growth of our award-winning investigations department, and most recently launched a suite of new content focused on reaching diverse audiences in different ways. Personally, I will miss Gary terribly. He has not only been a brilliant colleague, but a supportive friend. Crucially, his judgment is second to none, and his advice is always worth listening to." BBC Scotland said the search for his successor will begin immediately. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 26th of March 2025. From the news section. Palestine documentary coming to Stirling with unique Q&A. This article has been written by Gabriel McKay and it's being read by me, Corey. An exclusive screening of a film documenting a collaboration between runners from Palestine and Glasgow will be held in Stirling next week. Freedom to Run follows the Palestinian running group Right to Movement, along with 10 runners from Glasgow as they train for and run the Palestine and Edinburgh marathons. The former takes place in Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank, and the film depicts the challenges faced by both running groups due to the restriction of movement in the territory, illustrating the daily reality of living under occupation. The independent film is inspired by Dr. Christy Russell's PhD research into media perceptions of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Dr. Russell's research on news reporting and audiences' understanding of the current situation in Palestine heavily influenced her desire to portray the human face of Palestine. The filmmakers say Palestinians in the West Bank cannot travel more than 10 kilometres before being stopped by Israeli restrictions. Checkpoints, demands for permits, and the apartheid wall surrounding the occupied territories are all part of the struggle of daily life. Whilst in Palestine, the Scottish runners learn about the impact of the restrictions on everyday life, that something as unique and universal as running is far from an easy task. The runners discover that they are not so different, but that they live very different lives. Following the screening, there will be a Q&A session with Dr. Russell and the other filmmaker behind the documentary, Stephen Sheriff. The screening will be held on Thursday, April 3rd at 6 p.m. at the Path Foot Lecture Theatre at the University of Stirling. Tickets are free and can be found on the Eventbrite website. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Gabriel McKay and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 26th of March 2025. From the news section. Scottish economy outperforms UK significantly. Data revealed. This article has been written by Ian McConnell and it's being read by me, Corey. The Scottish economy recorded significant growth in January, in contrast to contraction in the UK as a whole. Latest official figures reveal. Scotland's onshore gross domestic product rose by 0.3% month-on-month in January, according to the data published by the Scottish Government. Figures published earlier this month by the Office for National Statistics showed that the UK GDP fell by 0.1% month-on-month in January. The rise north of the border in January was driven by the services sector and follows 0.5% month-on-month growth in Scottish onshore GDP in December. Comparing the 3 months to January with the August to October period, Scottish onshore GDP was up 0.5%. In the final 3 months of last year, Scottish onshore GDP had been flat compared with the third quarter of 2024. Output of Scotland's services sector is estimated to have grown by 0.5% month-on-month in January, while the production sector contracted by 1%. Meanwhile, construction sector output fell by 0.2% month-on-month in January. The Scottish Government Chief Economist Directorate observed that the sectors which made the largest contributions to overall month-on-month growth in GDP in January were retail, wholesale and motor trades, and professional and scientific and technical services. Data published late last month by the Scottish Government showed the economy north of the border expanded by 1.1% in 2024. Data from the Office of National Statistics had revealed earlier last month that the UK economy grew by 0.9% last year. Scottish Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said of today's data, "In the 3 months to January, GDP is now estimated to have grown by 0.5% compared to the previous 3-month period. This is a strong start to the year for the Scottish economy, particularly in the context of global economic uncertainty." However, she declared, "Many of the levers needed to deal with our economy lie with the UK government. In particular, the UK government must provide swift clarity on how today's spring statement, including its profoundly concerning plans to cut welfare, will impact Scotland's economy and budget. I am focused on delivering economic growth with the limited powers the Scottish Government holds, and creating an investor-friendly environment. Already this year, we've seen significant investments in a sub-sea cable manufacturer at Hunterston and new port infrastructure from Scapa to Montrose, and we are laser-focused on unlocking new private investment in the country's rapidly growing offshore wind industry." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Ian McConnell, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 26th of March 2025. From the news section. Scottish spaceport sacks award to see UK's first launch this year. This article has been written by Jodie Harrison, and it's being read by me, Corey. The UK will see its first space launch this year, with a rocket taking off from Scotland's Saxavord spaceport, Technology Secretary Peter Kyle told the Commons. Mr Kyle said that he will attend the event, which will see the first time a space-bound blast-off has taken place on European soil. I apologise, that's how the sentence is written. A number of companies plan to use the spaceport on Unst in the Shetland Isles as a launch site for commercial rockets. MPs have been told the spaceport at the northernmost tip of the UK will be ready for satellite launches by July. However, Mr Kyle went further in the Commons today to say that a launch in 2025 was now a certainty. His comments came in response to Liberal Democrat MP Alistair Carmichael of the Orkney and Shetland Islands, who said, "If that first space launch happens, and I believe it will happen at Saxavord in Unst. The Secretary of State will be very welcome to join us when it does. But in order for the UK space sector as a whole to recognise the full opportunities that we have here, we need to get serious about the delivery of the government space strategy." Mr Kyle replied, "When we came into office, we did not inherit a clear strategy for delivering on our priorities for space. That strategy is now being developed. We can see from the investments that we are making as a department and a government into space, and the way we are making sure that our relationship with the European Space Agency, ESA, is delivering for the British sector, because we have more grants being delivered now in the UK in the latest fund than any other country. It shows that we are delivering. Certainly, I share his enthusiasm, and certainly that a launch will happen this year, and I very much look forward to being there alongside him to witness it." Rocket Factory Augsburg, RFA, from Germany, is thought to have the most advanced plans, and it was officially licensed for spaceflight by the regulator last year. Orbex, based in Forres in northeast Scotland, recently announced it will switch its first launch from Sutherland Spaceport to Saxavord. It hopes to blast off its prime rocket for the first time towards the end of this year. Intelligence-gathering satellites could be launched into space from Scotland under an initiative involving the German military. In a bid to strengthen Europe's defence links, the German Air Force Space Command wants to use Saxavord spaceport for sovereign launch capabilities. It will mean the spaceport on Unst in the Shetland Isles will carry out launches of military as well as commercial satellites. Sovereign launch refers to the ability to reach space quickly and independently in the event of a conflict or disruption to vital satellites. Some in the space industry have pointed out that the US holds the vast majority of the world's sovereign launch capability, while Europe currently has almost no equivalent. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 27th of March, from the news section. Scottish Water strike to begin as 3 unions walk out. Article by Gabriel McKay. Scottish water workers will strike on Friday after talks over pay broke down, with a union blaming executive arrogance. Around 500 members of the Unite Union will strike at offices and wastewater treatment works across Scotland, impacting Scottish Water's ability to respond to water leakages, flooding, pollution and quality concerns. Workers from GMB in Unison, which represents over 1,000, will also walk out on Friday the 28th of March, with all 3 warning that further action is inevitable. Unite accuses executives of using ACAS talks to water down a previous pay offer and return to an inferior offer which was put forward in 2024. That offer would amount to a pay rise of 3.4% or £1,050 for those in the lowest grades of the 9-month period. Unite pointed to what is called an eye-watering executive pay levels at Scottish Water, saying the executive and non-executive members, including the chair of the public body, benefited from remuneration packages worth a combined of £1.15 million last year, up from £854,000 in 2023. Scottish Water has previously defended the salary packages, saying that they maintain and operate a simple remuneration structure with a pay policy that aims to attract, develop, motivate and retain highly talented people at all levels of the organisation, and to incentivise and reward good individual and corporal performance as well as outperformance. Emma Phillips, regional organiser for the Unison Scotland's 1,000 strong membership at the Scottish Water, said, "Their pay has not kept up with inflation for over the past 10 years, and most staff get paid in less than £31,000 per year. By contrast, senior managers ensure their own annual pay is measured in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. What's needed is a sensible solution that gives hard-working staff a pay raise that's fair." Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham said, "The arrogance shown by Scottish Water executives to the workforce and the wider Scottish public who rely on this essential service is astonishing. The pay packages of Scottish Water executives is eye-watering, yet they have deliberately wrecked pay talks. Unite will fully support our members in their fight for better jobs, pay and conditions at Scottish Water." Claire Greer, GMB Scottish organiser in Scottish Water, said, "It is now hard to be surprised at how this company takes part in negotiations, but even for them, this is beyond the pale. The terms of the offer were clear, had been discussed at length, and had already been rejected by our members. For the company to arrive at talks intended to find a way forward, only to produce a completely different and inferior offer, is not just frustrating, it is inexplicable." A Scottish Water spokesperson said, "We are very disappointed that we have not been able to reach an agreement with the trade unions. We would encourage them to restart meaningful negotiations as soon as possible and to reorganise the need to agree on sustainable pay award for our people. No one benefits from industrial action, and our focus is on continuing to deliver our millions of customers across Scotland. Our above-inflation pay offer is fair and progressive, prioritising the highest percentage increase in the businesses for those on the lowest salary grades, money that should have been in the employees' pockets now. We have improved the offer in an effort to reach an agreement with the trade unions and are now offering a combined deal for 2024-5 and 2025-6. This is a strong offer which is above inflation and the public sector pay policy." And that article was written by Gabriel McKay and read by me, Aaron. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 27th of March, from the news section. St Andrews use their sheep and Christmas trees to protect course. Article by Mark McDougall. St Andrews is to use a mix of their breed sheep, 28,500 tonnes of sand and 6,500 Christmas trees to protect the home of Gulf from coastal erosion. The work has been done as a part of its ongoing coastal management activity with its defence retreating in the recent years. The 28,500 tonnes of sand will be used to rebuild the dunes that protect the famous golf courses. It is part of the restoration work by St Andrews Links Trust, which has seen a range of steps taken to safeguard the courses and the surrounding area. It is keen to protect the Link golf courses from climate-driven impacts, and the Trust employs a team of monitor changes and delivery solutions across the coast, including the West Sands beach. The new plan is nature-based solutions and includes reviewing options and taking direct actions to strengthen sand dunes at the earliest risk of erosion, restoring coastal grasslands to maximum natural health, deploying a herbarium sheep to support coastal biodiversity, raise land for future protection, and actively engage with St Andrews and Fife residents to bring the old Christmas trees to be thatched into support for vulnerable dunes. The dunes along the estuary side of the Outhead Peninsula and Jubilee Course were restored in 2008 but have become unstable in recent years, particularly following the storms in the winter of 2023-4. The work began in February this year to stabilise defences and is scheduled for completion in early April. It has seen 28,500 tonnes of sand used to rebuild a new 200-metre dune, which is already the biggest and longest running dune project in Scotland. Although this work will stabilise sand dunes, it is accepted that this will require repetition to hold the shoreline in future. Given this project is within active erosion zone, this project is designed to give the Links Trust time to take adaptive measures and define a long-term strategy. Neil Coulson, Chief Executive of St Andrews Links Trust, said, "At the Home of Golf we take our responsibility as custodians of not just the old course, but our other famous courses extremely seriously. That's why we are proactively working to ensure we find solutions for problems that links course around the world may face in the not too distant future. We know that coastal erosion is a challenge, but from employing our team of rangers to implementing our plan and working with others to find solutions, we are leading the way in ensuring a future for links golf." Ranald Strachan, lead West Sands Ranger, said, "Our coastal management activity is about being proactive and ensuring a sustainable future for our world's famous golf courses, but also for the surrounding communities too. When it comes to coastal erosion, it's not just the links course at risk. That's why it's important that we could lead the way in St Andrews and support others to get ahead of issues which could cause serious problems in years to come. By taking a range of nature-based solutions and working with agencies in Scotland and beyond, we are using traditional and innovative approaches to safeguard this historic venue and prepare it for the future." And that article was written by Mark McDougall and read by me, Aaron. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 27th of March, from the news section. Untouched woodland near one of scenic Plockton goes for sale. Article by Jodie Harrison. A forest near one of Scotland's most picturesque villages has gone on sale with a price tag for more than £300,000. The 130-acre mixed Strathhelen Wood lies close to the popular West Coast village of Plockton, made famous by the TV series Hamish Macbeth. The sellers say the wood is rich in biodiversity and wildlife, offers stunning sea views towards the Lake of Skye and Torridon Hills, and has a potential for a cabin hideaway should planning permission be granted. It is on the market for offers over £325,000 with Goldcrest Land and Forestry Group. Broadleaf trees growing in the wood include semi-ancient Atlantic oaks, silver birch, sycamore, rowan and hazel. The area has been unmanaged and left to develop naturally for many years, resulting in a unique and tranquil woodland. Strathhelen Wood also includes some stick-up spruce, logpole pine and Scots pine. There is a historic arboretum within the property with some magnificent specimen trees. Construction of a cabin or hut would be subject to necessary planning consents. However, Argyll and Bute Local Development Plan states that established woodland areas are preferred location for huts. Plockton, in Wester Ross, has a population of less than 500, but is often counted one of the most attractive villages in Scotland. The tiny hamlet on the shores of Loch Carron in Wester Ross was also used as a backdrop for the cult horror film The Wicker Man and is firmly on the tourist trail. Jock Galbraith, partner at the Goldcrest Land and Forestry, said, "Strathhellam Wood is in a fabulous location overlooking the whitewashed cottages of Plockton, or the Jewel of the Highlands as it is known. The considerable amenity element of this woodland offers owners the chance to sink deep into the nature and enjoy the surrounding from rich biodiversity to stunning views. A cabin, should consent be given, would offer a wonderful escapist boat hole from which to enjoy the very attractive wood, as well as a base from which to explore the west coast and inner Hebrides. The area offers a wealth of outdoor activities from scenic cycling to sea swimming and sailing. Meanwhile, the commercial element also offers harvestable tax-free income. Such special and desirable woodlands rarely come to the market. Strathhellam offers a fabulous opportunity." And that article was written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Aaron.
From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 29th of March 2025, from the news section, "Body found in search for missing man." Report by Craig Williams. A body has been found during the search for a missing man. Police said officers were made aware of a body having been found in a wooded area near Bowhill View, Cardendon, around 8:30 am on Saturday. Formal identification has still to take place. However, the family of Andrew Hodge, who was reported missing from Cardendon, has been informed. There are not believed to be any suspicious circumstances, and the report will be sent to the Procurator Fiscal. And that report was written by Craig Williams and read by Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 29th of March, from the news section, "Exclusive: Call to end backdoor profiteering in Scotland's fostering system," by Andrew Learmonth. Campaigners have called on the Scottish Government to take action against fostering agencies diverting millions of pounds of public money to their private equity-backed parent companies. Legally, foster care services for children and young people in Scotland must be provided on a not-for-profit basis. However, according to the Commonweal think tank, some organisations are using loopholes in the law to do just that. In Scotland, the majority of fostering placements are provided by local authority foster carers or an independent fostering agency, IFA. Currently, there are 25 registered IFAs, providing just under a third of all the country's foster placements. They are required to register with the Care Inspectorate and must be a voluntary organisation. In their new report, the think tank claims some IFAs are diverting public money to parent companies, some owned by private equity firms based in tax havens, via interest-free loans, internal services and opaque company structures. The report looks at 3 of the biggest agencies in Scotland. They say Foster Care Associates Scotland Limited, officially registered as a not-for-profit, made nearly £300,000 in profit last year. The firm is part of the Nutrius Group, ultimately owned by Capvest Partners, a Jersey-based private equity partnership. The last unaudited financial statements for FCAS Limited for the year ending December 23rd report profits of £294,000, with a profit and loss account balance of £7.71 million. While various improvement initiatives are mentioned in the Director's annual report, which might require investment, none are costed, and as a result it is unclear how much of the profits have been reinvested in the service. The financial statements also show, however, that FCAS Limited owes £8.32 million to its parent company, an increase of over £1.6 million on the previous year, and has loaned its parent company £16.29 million interest-free, up £1.45 million from the previous year. The 2 directors of FCAS Limited are also the 2 directors of Nutrius Central Services Limited, and the accounts state they are remunerated through that company, which appears to charge fees to FCAS Limited for services. According to Nutrius Central Services Limited, the 2 directors were paid a combined total of £635,000 for their services. Foster Plus, Foster Care Limited, was registered by the Care Inspectorate in 2005 as a not-for-profit service, and there's another fostering service in Scotland which is part of the Nutrius UK Bidco group. It has the same two directors of FCAS who are also paid by Nutrius Central Services. Its latest accounts to December 2023 show it made gross profit of £2.738 million on a turnover of £6.714 million, reduced to £288,000 after administrative expenses. Its balance sheet shows that it has provided £8.073 million in interest-free loans to parent undertakings, but had, in the financial year, paid back almost £2.5 million in monies it had been lent by the group. The National Fostering Agency Scotland Limited was registered with the Care Inspectorate in February 2006. Its immediate parent company is NFAG Limited, based in Bolton, whose intermediate parent is SSCP Topco Limited, which is in turn owned by 83% by SSCP Spring Holdings Limited, based in Luxembourg. The ultimate owner is Stirling Square Capital Partners Jersey, AIFM Limited. According to its latest accounts to August 2023, NFAS Limited owed £15.65 million to group undertakings and lent them £17.11 million interest-free. Gross profit and turnover of £8.32 million was reported to be £3.76 million, but was reduced to £292,000 after £3.47 million was spent on administrative expenses. The report says the agencies operate in a way that is legally compliant but morally questionable. Commonweal is calling for a full legal ban on financial gain in foster care and say providers should be limited to local authorities and registered charities. It also backs new powers to enforce transparency and end backdoor profiteering. The report looks at the wider crisis in Scotland's foster care sector. The number of foster care households has fallen by 15% in recent years, and more carers are now leaving than entering the system. That means many children face multiple placements and disrupted care. The report also warns that some IFAs are engaging in aggressive recruitment, competing with councils for carers, while delivering inconsistent training and support. Despite spending heavily on marketing, local authorities still recruit more carers, but are under-resourced and struggling to retain them. Meanwhile, foster carers themselves face precarious conditions. Most are classed as self-employed contractors, earning around £250 a week with no sick pay, pension or job security, despite working effectively on a 24/7 basis. By comparison, a residential care worker will be paid around £600 a week and gets pension contributions, sick pay and paid holidays. Because foster carers rely on the agency that recruited them for training levels vary significantly. The report recommends exploring an employment model for foster carers, with national pay scales, rights and benefits. The Scottish Government has expressed support for reducing the role of profit in care, and has recently closed a consultation on the future of council care. Robin McAlpine of Commonweal told the Herald, "The government's slogan for young children in care is supposed to be 'You will grow up loved,' not 'You will grow up profitable.' The prohibition on commercial companies making profit out of children in foster care is there for a very good reason. The vast majority of people in Scotland will be appalled by the tricks and scams which are allowing tax, have-based equity funds to top-slice public money, which is supposed to be there for the support of the most vulnerable young people. Surely the Scottish Government should know this is happening. If they do, and they're turning a blind eye to it, then they should be ashamed of themselves. If they don't know, it raises the questions about how hard they're looking, whether they're even trying to keep the system not for profit. That should be a scandal in itself. All they have to do is specify that only public or charitable foster agencies are eligible for public funding, and this ends straight away. I'm the father of an adopted son, and so I'm very well aware of how difficult the lives of children and babies are who need foster care, and I'm frankly angry at their needs seeming to be becoming second to those of tax haven equity funds." Tim Barclay, CEO of National Fostering Group, said, "As the largest independent fostering agency in the UK, National Fostering Group derives outstanding outcomes for the 3,700 foster children in our care. Administrative expenses include all associated costs of running the agency, from staffing, property and office overheads. Services have also been provided to Scotland through group-wide functions for clinical and therapeutic support and training, quality audit and support, learning and development for staff and carers, HR, staff recruitment and payroll support, insurance renewals and claims handling, ICT, finance, as well as costs to cover attracting, screening and processing applications and assessment for prospective new carers, and legal support. These are essential costs to maintain daily operations and administer our business so that we can continue to deliver high quality foster care to children and young people in need, leading to a higher educational and quality of life outcomes. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "The promise is clear that there is no place for profiting in how Scotland cares for its children, and the Scottish Government supports this principle. It is a legal requirement for all fostering services in Scotland to operate on a not-for-profit basis. Foster Care Associates Scotland Limited and Foster Plus (brackets Foster Care, close brackets) Limited were approached for comment." And that article was an exclusive by Andrew Learmonth, read by Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 29th of March 2025, from the news section. New Glasgow train station mooted as part of action plan. Report by Sarah Hilley. An action plan for Glasgow's Parkhead has been drawn up to improve the area as hopes continue that it may get its own train station. Part of the strategy would see the area changing to become a 20-minute neighbourhood, which aims for essential services to be within easy reach for walking and cycling. The action plan is due to be finished in the autumn, and a consultancy team have been appointed at the council. Councillor Kieran Turner pointed out there had been talk of a railway station in Parkhead, as he raised issues with the state of a site behind Parkhead Forge at a recent council meeting. He stated that access from Carntyne across the railway line to the shopping centre is awful. An official agreed it was a difficult junction for pedestrians in a challenging area. He said they hope to bring forward a proposal to address it. The officer said, "There is a long-term aspiration for a rail haul there. We will continue to support that, but it's quite a difficult journey to get a new railway station anywhere." He said, "As part of the Parkhead Town Centre Action Plan, we will look at how to access the town centre from all sides, and that would include the north. It is certainly something that is front and centre of our thinking." The Parkhead Action Plan is part of major changes contained in the Inner East Strategic Development Framework Action Programme. Councillors received an update at last week's Economy, Housing, Transport and Regeneration Committee. A council paper said, "The action plan will use a placemaking approach to create a vibrant, attractive town centre that can respond to changing needs. It will identify a mix of short, medium and long-term options that will help improve the quality of the centre and support the creation of a 20-minute sustainable neighbourhood." Other developments include public rail makeovers at Duke Street and John Knox Street, 70 affordable homes being built in the former Belgrove Hotel site, and a new park at the meat market linking to a path at Duke Street. And an article was written by Sarah Hilley and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 29th of March, from the news section. Response to Palestinian journalist deaths, box ticking, by Gabriel Mackay. Campaigners have accused the Scottish and UK governments of a tick box response to the killing of two Palestinian journalists. Hossam Shabat, 23, and Mohammed Mansour, 29, were both killed by Israel this week, with the former targeted while driving his car. More than 170 journalists have been killed since Israel began its military campaign in Gaza in response to the October 7 attacks, in which 4 Israeli journalists were among those killed by Hamas militants. Foreign journalists have not been allowed to enter Gaza, which is an occupied territory, except on rare trips embedded with the IDF. As a result, almost all of the journalists killed in the conflict were Palestinian. In October 2024, The IDF accused Mr. Shabat and 5 other journalists of being members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. By way of evidence, it produced a spreadsheet which, it claimed, showed that Mr. Shabat had been trained as a sniper in 2019. His employer, Al Jazeera, said it was fabricated evidence, while the journalist himself said it was an assassination threat and obvious attempt to preemptively justify our murder. Mr. Shabat's mother said following his death that, when she told him to stay away from danger, he had told her, "Mother, it is written, even if I were at home, if you hid me in your arms, it would kill me. I'm a martyr and I know it." The Arabic term shaheed, meaning martyr, is used to refer to any Palestinian, regardless of their civilian or fighter status or religious affiliation, killed by Israel. The deliberate targeting of journalists is a war crime. They are considered civilians unless they actively take part in combat, and the IDF admitted that it has assassinated Mr. Shabat, Ismail al-Ghul, Ramil al-Rifai and Hamza Dadou, among others. Israel claims that militants have assumed the disguise of journalists while providing little or no evidence for these claims. Mr. Mansour was killed by the IDF as part of an airstrike in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Israel said that it had been targeting members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The killing of the journalist was condemned by both the UK and Scottish governments, but campaigners say neither went far enough, as they failed to lay out concrete steps towards peace and did not pledge to halt arms sales or impose sanctions. The Scottish government said it was imperative that journalists are able to carry out their vital work in Gaza unimpeded, and called for an immediate ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages, and unimpeded access to humanitarian aid. The UK government said journalists must be able to do their essential work in safety, and said all parties must re-engage with negotiations to allow a surge of aid into Gaza, the release of the remaining hostages, and secure a permanent end to this conflict. Jerry Coates of Scotland for Palestine said, "Despite everything the world has witnessed over the last 19 months, including Israel's brutal targeted killing of journalists, all we've heard from the Scottish and UK governments at most is 'we condemn', and no steps to actually prevent the murderous campaign of their ally, Israel. Condemnation of Israel without meaningful action rings hollow, and won't stop Israel from starving Palestinians en masse, from torturing surgeons to death, and from assassinating Palestinian journalists as they report on Israel's crimes." Val Shohish of the Scottish Palestinian Society said, "In just over 500 days, Israel has killed more than 50,000 Palestinians. Its illegal aid block on Gaza has entered its 3rd week. The World Food Programme this week warned that there is a maximum of 2 weeks' worth of food left, and hundreds of thousands of people are at risk of severe hunger and malnutrition. Our governments in Holyrood and Westminster can no longer ignore the horrific humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They must put their words into action and push for peace by imposing sanctions on Israel, including an embargo on funding and arms sales until it complies with international law." Marie Shepherd of Show Israeli Genocide The Red Card said, "Sanctions through supports is one of the simplest and most effective ways to push countries like Israel to stop committing human rights violations. Our governments have imposed these measures against past regimes such as apartheid South Africa and, more recently, Russia following its invasion of Ukraine. Yet, when it comes to Israel, the world's longest illegal occupation that stands accused of genocide, all we hear are empty words." A motion by James Dornan MSP has been submitted to the Scottish Parliament, calling for a boycott in Israel's sporting participation. We urge the rest of the Parliament members to get behind it and drop their backing of the counter-amendments submitted by Jimmy Dean MSP in a bid to help sports wash Israel. And the article was written by Gabriel Mackay and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 29th of March 2025, from the sports section. Matthew Lindsay. Why Scottish football needs Wanyama to be more saucy than Senderos. By Chief Football Writer Matthew Lindsay. Dunfermline Athletic's run of form has been so lamentable of late that new manager Neil Lennon could probably spark a distinct upturn in fortunes if he pitched Victor Meldrew in a holding midfielder just before in front of his centre-backs, Kel Benedictus and Jeremiah Chiluka Mullen. So landing Victor Wanyama this week, and I don't believe it, signing if ever there was one, is sure to help the East End Park Club in their bid to avoid relegation from the William Hill Championship, even though the former Celtic, Southampton and Spurs man is at the grand old age of 33 now, and nearing the end of his playing days. The William Hill Championship strugglers, who have won just one of their last 8 competitive matches, and who have failed to net in no fewer than 7 of those outings, take on third place to Ayr United at Somerset Park this afternoon, and then second place Livingston at home on Wednesday evening. It will, then, be hard for Lennon, even with his old mucker Wanyama on board, to make an immediate impact and pick up results which help to steer Dunfermline towards a second-tier safety in the coming days. But the presence of such a famous footballer, the guy who scored in that historic Champions League win over Barcelona, and who broke the Scottish transfer record back in 2013 when he was sold for £12.5 million in the old Grey Toon, will certainly lift the spirits of squad members and supporters alike at what is a tough time. As one long-suffering, disbelieving, ecstatic, overexcitable Par fan remarked on social media in the hours following the bombshell announcement, there has never been a bigger signing than this in Scottish football in my lifetime. That bold statement very much lit, to use a beloved tabloid phrase, a blue touch paper. The Kenyan is, it was quickly pointed out, far from the first household name to be arrived at an unlikely outpost in the beautiful game. Not only that, he is by no means the biggest star to materialise in an improbable location in this country. In fact, the list of fading icons to rock up here for a la football mercenary John Stark, a bumper payday from a short-term stay before they retire is lengthy. If that Dunfermline diehard was to travel over the Forth Road Bridge into Edinburgh and tell any Hibernian supporter he bumped into that this piece of transfer business trumped any other acquisition which has been made here, he would get pretty short shrift. Frank Sozzi was nearly 34 when he arrived at Easter Road in the second half of the 1998-99 season. However, the former French internationalist and Champions League winner quickly showed that he remained a formidable talent. He was dubbed Le God, as he helped Hibs win promotion to the Premiership, finish third in the top flight, and go unbeaten in 7 meetings with Hearts in the following 2.5 years. High B's of an older generation will still be able to remember when George Best, who some argue was, in his auto-brief prime, the greatest player the world has ever seen, briefly plied his trade down Leith Way due to the 1979-80 campaign. If Dumbarton had succeeded in their audacious bid to land Dutch great Johan Cruyff, manager Sean Fallon travelled to Amsterdam for talks with El Salvador, and then memorably told reporters, "I have spoken to the boy," upon his return. The following season, it would have topped that coup. But there have been numerous ageing ballers who have come to Scotland. Joe Hart, Robbie Keane, Roy Keane, Freddie Lundberg, Kasper Schmeichel, Kolo Toure, and Ian Wright, all Celtic. Claudio Caniggia and Fabrizio Ravanelli, both Dundee. Chris Waddle, Falkirk. Steve Archibald, Hibernian and St Mirren. Joey Barton, James Beattie, Caniggia again, Jermaine Defoe, Francis Jeffers, Nico Cranchiter, and Philip Senderos, all Rangers. Jody Morris, St Johnstone, and Eric Jemba, St Mirren, all, to name just a handful, caused a flurry of excitement. Some, like Archibald, Caniggia, Defoe, Hart, both Keens, Morris, Schmeichel and Sozzi, more than justified the outlay which it took to secure their services, and are remembered fondly to this day. But many others, Barton, Beattie, Jemba, Jeffers, Granger, Lundberg, Senderos and Toure, looked as if they were just cashing in on their reputation and failed to deliver. It doesn't show Scottish football in particularly good light when they disappoint. In fact, it can leave the game in the country open to ridicule, to unfair accusations that it's a sporting backwater from down south. On occasion, the presence of a well-known individual whose best days are clearly far behind him can be akin to a travelling circus freak show. The signing of Wanyama is the most exciting thing to happen in Dunfermline since Robert the Bruce was laid to rest there in 1329. The novelty of having such a high-profile figure playing for their team, though, will quickly wear off for fans in the weeks ahead if he fails to deliver and they are unable to move away from the relegation zone. Indeed, he could find himself singled out for abuse from the stands if he struggles. Victor Wanyama has to be far more Frank Sosie than Philip Senderos for the good of Dunfermline, Neil Lennon, and Scottish football as a whole. And that piece was written by Matthew Lindsay and read by me, Ian McKenna.
From the Herald, Sunday, 30th of March 2025, Sports Section. Athletics must be admired for taking stance to protect female sport, by Susan Eaglestaff, sports writer. A cheek swab is, in most cases, entirely uncontroversial, quick, easy and non-invasive. It's typically the blandest of bland medical procedures, except in sport, that is. The news that World Athletics will introduce mandatory cheek swabs for all those wishing to compete in the female category has caused quite an uproar. Some say a disproportionate uproar. The reason for this move by track and field's governing body is clear. It wants to protect fairness in the female category. Protecting the female category or not has become a hot, potentially the hottest topic in sport in recent years. As has been established, inclusion and fairness cannot coexist when it comes to the female category in sport, and specifically when talking about trans women or DSD women in sport. The issue with trans women competing in the female category is self-explanatory, with the question being, should individuals who were born male but transitioned to becoming women be permitted to compete as women? Research suggests that individuals who have been born male retain some residual benefits of going through male puberty and so have an unfair advantage over their female competitors. Increasingly, sporting bodies believe trans women should not be allowed to compete as women, but there is certainly not a consensus. And then there's DSD athletes, who are individuals who do not develop along typically male-female lines, and instead their hormones, genes and reproductive organs have a mix of male and female characteristics. This means female DSD athletes, many believe, have an advantage over their female competitors. What has caused so much consternation within sport in the past decade, during which this issue has become higher profile than ever, is that so few of those who make the rules in sport have been willing to take a hard and fast stance on it. In many cases, governing bodies and officials have obfuscated and danced around the issue as much as they can in order to delay or defer making a tough decision. There's talk about fairness and inclusion both being vitally important within sport, which clearly is true. But when it comes to a point that both can't be protected and one needs to be chosen over the other, so many sports have been unwilling to stick their head above the parapet. This is where athletics have been an impressive outlier. Athletes have stood alone in world sport by making clear that the protection of the female category is their priority above all else. Certainly track and field has been forced to deal with this issue more publicly than most other sports. In Caster Semenya, the South African former 800-metre Olympic champion, the sport has an athlete who was forced to publicly endure a truly horrendous process while it was decided whether she was eligible to compete in the female category or not. Semenya, it has been widely reported, DSD, and given she dominated the 800 metres for a period, it's unsurprising that her case became so high profile. Ultimately, it was ruled by World Athletics that Semenya and other DSD athletes could only compete if they took testosterone-suppressing medication. Semenya's case, plus the increasing prevalence of trans women succeeding in women's sport, made it clear to those at the top of athletics, at least, that set-in-stone rules were required. It's hard to argue with this thinking. The worst of all worlds is what's happened too many times previously, that athletes compete in the female category but are then vilified publicly by those who believe they should not be competing as females, which is why the cheek swab idea by World Athletics is the best move forward. Some of the testing Semenya was reportedly subjected to was invasive, degrading and humiliating. No one would ever condone or support this being the procedure going forward. So cheek swabs, which take all of a few seconds to complete and consistently give a reliable result in testing DNA, are an excellent introduction. The timeline for the implementing the cheek swab procedure has yet to be confirmed, but it's hoped it will be in place by this year's World Championships. Athletics not only have to take their test once in their career, and it ensures there should no longer be any grey area when it comes to who is eligible to compete as a female and who is not. We're not just talking about the integrity of female women's sport, but actually guaranteeing it, said World Athletics President Seb Coe. And this we feel is a really important way of providing confidence and maintaining that absolute focus on the integrity of the competition. I find it hard to find fault with this reasoning, yet there has been considerable kickback to the cheek swab policy. There are those who claim it's discriminatory and others who claim it's racist, given it's women of colour who are more likely to be born DSD. A policy which deals with the contentious issue of who is female is never going to appease everyone. But despite this, a policy has to be made. Everyone witnessed the madness that engulfed the Olympic boxing tournament last summer when Algerian fighter Aman Khalif won gold despite reports claimed she'd previously failed a gender test. Such a circus can never be allowed to happen again, and World Athletics is surely mindful of the potential for something to explode if they don't eliminate the grey area that currently exists. Cheek swabs do this. They make a very contentious subject as uncomplicated as possible, yet there will be those who claim inclusion is being sacrificed. But World Athletics has decided where its priorities lie. There will, I'm sure, be more than a few sports that follow in the coming years. That article was by Susan Eaglestaff. From the Herald, Monday, 31st March 2025. The Many Reasons Behind Kilmarnock's Dismal Season by Craig Fowler, sports columnist. At least half the clubs in this season's Scottish Premiership have had the threat of relegation hanging over them at some point. This includes two members of the current top six, as both Hearts and Hibs began the campaign on dismal runs. But other than St Johnstone, who sank to the bottom in December and haven't moved since, it's felt like every time a team has been sucked towards the black hole, they've managed to rally. One team who have hovered around the precipice for the majority of the campaign are Kilmarnock, though it was long assumed that they'd get their act together and start motoring up the table. After all, they kept together the core of a team that was the fourth best in the country last term and acquitted themselves well in European competition to begin this one. There was belief not only in the players but also in the manager, Derek McInnes. While the veteran manager has his critics, it can't be denied that he's been remarkably consistent at this level throughout his career. First sustaining St Johnstone amongst the elite after leading them to promotion, and then making Aberdeen a perennial top four outfit across an 8-year period, including 4 consecutive runners-up places. However, following Saturday's 5-1 defeat to St Mirren at the Sizemouth Stadium, the 53-year-old is under real pressure from the rugby park support, who are now entirely fed up with what they're witnessing. They've picked up just 1 point from their last 5 games, completely capitulated in the second half in Paisley, and were ultimately thankful for Cyril Dessers and Rangers' late comeback at Dundee to stop them from falling to 11th. This was not something anyone envisioned for Killie coming into 24-25. So what the hell has happened? European football hampered the momentum right from the start. Killie ended up playing 6 ties across 3 rounds. They competed in 4 Premiership games 3 days after those fixtures, mustering only 1 point between them. And even that was fortunate after Jordan Obita gave away a daft injury time penalty in the 1-1 draw with Hibs. They also exited the League Cup during this period. Killie didn't have a particularly great start to last season either. They would recover to lose only 4 times in their final 23 league matches, with every defeat coming against the old firm. But they started by winning just once in their opening 8 Premiership games. What also killed them early this season was poor discipline. Kilmarnock have had 7 players sent off, the most of any team in the league, while Liam Donnelly and Joe Wright have each been sent off twice. They picked up 4 points from those 7 contests, none of which came against Celtic or Rangers. They've since cleared up their act and haven't received a red card in 2025 to date, but it was enough to further contribute to subpar form overall, which increasingly sapped confidence. There have been several key performers from 2023 to 24 who have failed to maintain their form. Danny Armstrong's drop-off has been the most catastrophic. The winger was one of the best players in the league last term, and certainly one of the most influential. He's gone from 14 assists and 9 goals in all competitions to 6 assists and 0 goals. Killie reportedly turned down a £400,000 bid for him last summer and another 6-figure offer in January, despite him being in the final year of his contract, and now he struggles to get into the starting 11. The 27-year-old is far from alone. Lewis Mayo looked like a Scotland centre-back in waiting, but he struggled this term, making a series of uncharacteristic mistakes, including giving away the penalty for St Mirren's second goal on Saturday. Age looks like it's finally catching up with striker Marley Watkins, who has netted just 1 goal since October, and David Watson, double-winning Young Player of the Year last season, is finding things a lot more difficult this time around. There have also been injuries to key players. Killie's captain, workhorse and talismanic attacking presence, Kyle Vassell, has been missing since January the 2nd. Matty Kennedy, Danny Armstrong's partner in crime on the other wing, missed 3 months just as he was emerging as the team's best player. Stuart Finlay only just returned on Saturday as a substitute, having sat on the sidelines for 4 months, while first-choice goalkeeper Robbie McCrory has been in and out of the lineup due to his own injury issues. McGuinness has taken some of the blame for failing to freshen things up more, putting too much faith in the players replicating last season's highs. It's an understandable mistake. The continuity was a big reason why so many backed him for another successful campaign. But in hindsight, it was perhaps too much to ask of an ageing group. The manager has also frustrated supporters with his tactical choices. His use of Corey and Daba in particular has been strange. The left back has been moved around the park and is often tasked with joining the midfield or central defence, even when he starts in his natural role. There's an alarming lack of consistency in selection throughout the side. The centre of midfield especially seems to change most weeks. While there are mitigating circumstances for this, as we've covered, blame also lies at McGuinness's door for seemingly not knowing how best to pivot in the face of unforeseen challenges. Saturday's result would typically serve as the end of the line for many managers, but the Kilmarnock hierarchy still appear to be fully behind their man, whose contract runs for another 2 years. Even still, given the current heat from fans and with a trip to Celtic before the split, this Saturday's match with Motherwell at Rugby Park looks like a must-not-lose encounter. Otherwise, the board may be forced to act. That article was by Craig Fowler.
From Herald Scotland, 27th of March 2025. From the STEM section of the business section. Dundee University is revolutionising epidurals using holograms, and this article is an exclusive by Garrett Stell. Researchers at a Scottish university have developed a way to make epidurals safer and more efficient using holograms. Anaesthetists can deliver upper back epidurals with increased accuracy thanks to first-of-its-kind augmented reality (AR) software developed at the University of Dundee. Using a visor headset, technicians are able to see the real world overlaid with a virtual map of the patient's body. Honorary Professor Graham MacLeod, who came up with the idea for the hologram-assisted thoracic epidural insertion, is a medical researcher at the university's School of Medicine and is practicing consultant anaesthetist at NHS Tayside. Working with NHS Tayside's medical physics team at Ninewells Hospital and other private partners, Professor MacLeod has used AR technology to simplify the procedure, making it safer and more efficient. Upper back or thoracic epidurals are used for numbing the upper torso during chest and abdominal surgeries and post-operation recovery. They are typically administered blind, meaning the anaesthetist needs to insert a needle through the back into the spine and then locate the small area required for the actual injection. Locating the target area often requires several insertions. Not only is this painful for the patient, but there is also a high level of risk if the drug is inserted into the wrong area, which could lead to damage to the spinal cord or life-threatening conditions. While wearing a VR headset and using the new technology, anaesthetists can see reality and a virtual impression of inside the patient's body created from a CT scan, which appears as a 3D hologram over their back. Viewing the real and virtual images simultaneously allows the anaesthetist to insert the drug directly into the target area. Early tests have shown that the new technology can reduce the required number of needle insertions by half, from 4 to 2. Professor MacLeod said that the technology is a 3D solution to a 3D problem and has the potential to revolutionise the way injections are delivered. Working with the medical physics department, we established a way to create a hologram of the internal bone structure using images collected through CT scanning. We've developed something which could potentially revolutionise lower back epidural administration, and the opportunity is there to develop it further for deep tissue procedures, chronic pain, radiology, and injections into joints. Administering a thoracic epidural is a complex procedure, even when compared to the lower back epidural typically used during childbirth. Because of this, many anaesthetists opt for simpler methods, such as injecting a local anaesthetic into the abdominal muscles. Professor MacLeod said thoracic epidurals are much more efficient pain relievers, which is why the development carries so much promise. The upper back epidural is much more complicated to administer than the lower back epidural, which is typically used during childbirth. That's purely down to the shape of the vertebrae at the upper location. The bones overlap, the angles are more acute, and getting the needle into the right place is more complex. It's also very near to the lungs, spinal cord, and blood vessels of the vertebral canal. If any of those were hit, then there could be huge life-threatening complications. Patients' bodies can vary in appearance on the inside as much as they do on the outside. The bones of the vertebra could meet at different places, for example, or the ligament might not be directly in the middle. That's why a personalised CT scan of the patient is essential. Following initial tests on 58 practising anaesthetists across Tayside, Aberdeen and Edinburgh, the new technology is now in a new phase of testing to integrate digital planning, improve automation and simplify the software. An academic paper, outlining the hologram-assisted approach was recently published in the British Journal of Anaesthesia. And that article was an exclusive by Garrett Stell.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 1st of April 2025, from the Voices section. Figures show Scots even more unhappy with public services than the English. This article is by Emily Gray. Rising demand for public services, coupled with a tight funding environment, means the need for public service reform is more pressing than ever. In his post-budget press conference at Bute House last month, John Swinney emphasised that if trust in politics is to be restored, we must deliver public services that work better for the people we serve. What is clear from a major new Ipsos study is that place makes a considerable difference to how well-served people feel by their public services. Scott's views on the state of public services will be worrying for Scotland's politicians and public service leaders. Ipsos' new research, based on a large-scale survey of more than 20,000 UK adults and using 8 MRP models, reveals ongoing dissatisfaction with the state of public services across Scotland. Over 8 in 10 Scots, the 83%, say that public services have got worse in the last 5 years, higher than the UK average of 75%. The Scottish public are more dissatisfied with the quality of education, public transport, housing, and the availability of suitable jobs near to where they live, compared with the average across the UK. Health services are perennially important concern for the public. Half of Scots, 51%, say they are dissatisfied with the quality of health services provided by local GPs and NHS hospitals, with an identical proportion in England saying the same. While overall satisfaction with health service quality in Scotland is similar to the UK average, the results point to considerable geographical inequalities within Scotland, with a range from local authorities with higher levels of satisfaction, such as Orkney, the Western Isles and Shetland, to more dissatisfaction across the Central Belt. Understanding what drives these geographical inequalities and what actions and levers would help to reduce them should be a priority for those leading health service reforms. On education, too, dissatisfaction is higher among Scots than it is among those in England or Northern Ireland, with 30% of the Scottish public report they are satisfied with the quality of state primary and secondary education, 28% say they are dissatisfied, and 27% that they are neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. These mixed views may in part reflect performance issues, with the most recently published international PISA results from the OECD finding a long-term decline in performance in reading, math and science in Scotland's secondary schools. While Scotland's reading score was ahead of Northern Ireland, it lagged behind Northern Ireland in math and science and behind England in all 3 areas of assessment. So, who do Scots hold responsible for the state of public services in their local area? The Scottish Government is most blamed for the perceived deterioration of local public services, with 62% of Scots who think public services have got worse locally, saying the Scottish Government is mainly responsible for this. However, over half, 56%, blame the previous Conservative UK government, which underlines that in a devolved context, who the public hold responsible for the perceived decline in public services is perhaps more complex. while the Scottish Government sets policies for the NHS and schools in Scotland, the overall budget envelope for running these services is largely determined by the UK Government, a point often referenced by the Scottish National Party when under fire for performance in these areas. Local councils do not escape blame either, with over half of Scots, 52%, attributing the downward trend in public services to councils. The widespread dissatisfaction with the state of public services is reflected in the public's largely negative views of the Scottish Government's delivery record after almost 18 years in power. At present, Scots are much more likely to view the Scottish Government's performance on key services since the last Holyrood elections critically than they are to view it favourably. There is no consensus on whether Scottish Labour would do any better at delivering public services. However, with the commonest response among the public being that of a Labour Scottish Government would make no difference. These findings underline that Scotland's government and political parties cannot afford not to focus on public services, not least because services matter to voters. Polling conducted prior to Westminster and Holyrood elections makes this clear. Ahead of the 2024 UK general election, the NHS was the number one issue that Scots saw as very important in helping them decide which party to vote for. And in the run-up to the last Scottish Parliament elections in 2021, education and the NHS were the second and third ranked issues that Scots expected would shape their vote, behind only Scottish independence and devolution. With the constitutional question having slipped lower down the Scottish public's agenda in recent years, public services may well be an even bigger concern for voters at the May 2026 Holyrood elections than they were in 2021. The old adage that all politics is local is one that all Scotland's political parties would do well to heed ahead of next year's Holyrood elections, setting out how they will improve public services and developing a credible narrative around this that shows they are engaging with and delivering on public concerns will help to demonstrate that they are in touch with voters' needs and priorities. Whether the current Scottish Government can demonstrate tangible progress on the services that matter to voters in Scotland before next May, or not, may well shape the SNP's fortunes at the ballot box. That article was by Emily Gray. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 1st of April 2025, from the business section. ScotGov accused of prioritising landlords as rent cap ends. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The Scottish Government has prioritised landlords, a tenant union has claimed, as a rent cap ends on Tuesday. Ministers announced earlier this year that the measures which effectively capped rent increases at 12% would be removed on April the 1st. As a result, renters could be exposed to substantial increases ahead of the rent control measures in the Housing Scotland Bill, which will allow councils to declare rent control zones, capping costs at 1% over the rate of inflation. The bill is currently making its way through Holyrood, but its implementation could take until 2027. The government has sought to stress that private renters remain protected from above-market rate rent increases, while urging them to seek a review of any rent increases. Analysis by Tenants' Union Living Rent of Scottish Government figures showed adjudications by Rent Service Scotland saw rents increase by £71 on average, while landlords proposed hikes of £154 on average. Ruth Gilbert, the chair of the union's national campaign, warned that the end of the measures would see tenants plunged into further poverty, and landlords were celebrating the change. This government has once again prioritised landlords' vested interests over tenants' need for affordable housing, she added. It is completely irresponsible to end the measures that have offered tenants interim protections from sky-high rent increases before permanent rent controls become law, and while rents continue to push people into poverty. Without this cap, tenants are going to be hit hard by a wave of open market rent increases as landlords cash in following 2 years of emergency protections. Open market rent is completely unaffordable. It is ludicrous that this government thinks it is a fair metric for determining rent levels. The rent controls and protections contained in the housing bill will likely only come into effect in 2027. Until then, tenants are facing completely uncapped rents. This will decimate our communities, force people out of their homes, and further exacerbate both homelessness and poverty. As we've seen, unregulated, out-of-control rents also drive high inflation. While Scottish Green MSP Maggie Chapman said tenants would be receiving notices of rent increases from Tuesday morning with little notice or chance to appeal. It will be a dark day for renters, but rogue landlords will be celebrating in the knowledge that they are no longer being constrained, she added. It doesn't need to be like this. The Scottish Government can stop it. The support that the Scottish Greens secured can be extended, offering renters protections from the most predatory landlords. All parties agree that we are in a housing emergency. The last thing we should be doing is allowing rents to be increased without limit. A spokeswoman for the Scottish Government said, Scotland provides renters with some of the strongest protections anywhere in the UK. From April the 1st, protections continue to be in place against rent increases above market rent for most private tenants, and we would encourage tenants to make use of their right to a review of a rent increase. The Scottish Government has a strong track record in delivering affordable housing in Scotland from 2007 to the end of December 2024, more than 136,000 affordable homes were delivered, with 97,000 of those for social rent. We know that there is a need for longer-term action on rents to ensure a fairer system for tenants. That is why we are taking forward measures in the housing bill to support the introduction of longer-term rent control where this is needed. That article was by Jodie Harrison.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, rate and review, and to tell your friends about our service.